Despite how talented they are, the Philadelphia Eagles do have some pretty big question marks going into the 2025 season, as this offseason, Philly saw a lot of important pieces from their Super Bowl winning team leave and go elsewhere. So now, that's left the Birds to rely on a bunch of promising but unproven guys to step up, and it might just end up making or breaking their season. And that includes some talented up-and-coming pass rushers, a few guys in the secondary, and one guy on offense who I think is more important than all the rest. So in this video, we're going to break down the Eagles' biggest X factors going into the season, so let's get started right now. Let's face it, there's just not very much going on right now for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, it's just that time of the offseason where things are pretty much dead, as the team wrapped up their OTAs and mandatory minicamp weeks ago, and with training camp still being about a month away, summer break is in full swing in Philadelphia. But naturally, I mean, there are still some things going on, and even though this isn't necessarily the busiest time of year, that doesn't mean that we don't still have plenty to talk about. And specifically, over these past several weeks, I've actually made quite a few lists covering topics such as the Eagles' biggest standouts in OTAs and minicamp, as well as the Eagles players who I think are most likely to break out in 2025. So today, I figured why not do one more list and go over a topic that I think is going to be extremely important to the Eagles' success this season. That being a group of guys who I would consider to be the Eagles' biggest X factors in 2025. And when I say X factors, I mean guys that, depending on how they pan out this year, could wind up having a huge impact on the Birds' success this season in a positive or negative way. And in a lot of ways, I think most of, if not all, these guys will play a major part in determining whether the Eagles have a Super Bowl repeat this year or if they come up short. So let's start out on defense, because of course, after last season, the Birds saw a lot of starters and important players depart in free agency or via trade. So now this season, Vic Fangio's unit is obviously going to be relying a lot more on these younger, more unproven type of players to step up and fill those voids, just so that they can stay on that elite level that they were at last season. And all this really starts in the defensive line, where of course the Birds lost both Milton Williams and Josh Sweat in free agency, along with Brandon Graham to retirement. So again, the Birds need a few young players to step up, and perhaps the guy with the biggest weight on his shoulders is the third-year edge rusher Nolan Smith. I mean, think about it. With Sweat and BG both gone, Nolan is now the leader and presumed best player among that group of edge rushers. So for the defensive line and pass rush to be successful like they were last year, they absolutely need Nolan Smith to step up. And that's the very reason why PFF writer Dalton Wasserman recently called Smith the Birds' biggest make-or-break candidate this season, which, by the way, is what gave me the idea to make this video. So the question then becomes, well, can Nolan Smith actually step up and take his game to the next level in 2025? Well, based on recent history, I'd have to say yes, just considering that last year we saw Nolan Smith go from a guy who, we forget, some Eagles fans were already calling a bust before the season started, but by the end of the season, he proved himself to be one of the most promising up-and-coming pass rushers in the entire NFL. I mean, the guy just got better and better with each passing week, and he looked like an absolute star in the playoffs. So now, given another year of experience, another year in Vic Fangio's defense, and with an even bigger role than last year, I'd only expect him to continue to get better, even with the fact that he is still working his way back from a torn triceps injury that he suffered in the Super Bowl. I mean, sure, that's definitely a setback, don't get me wrong, but based on recent reports, first off, it seems like Nolan has already made great strides in his recovery, and he himself has also made it clear this offseason that he is hungrier than ever to both win another Super Bowl and come back stronger than ever.
Man, feed the fire and be hungry. Feed the fire and be hungry. And I always say, like, man, Coach Smart used to say, all right, last year's last year. Turn the page. Like, I know everybody excited for the rings and all of that. I've been turned the page, you know, especially after the parade. I got back to doing what I was doing because I knew I had to rehab and got to be stronger. You know, I said last year, you know, I want to be bulletproof, and that's what I'm going through every year, like trying to be bulletproof, build my armor into going into this year.
Personally, I'm expecting big things from Nolan Smith in 2025, possibly 10+ sacks, and again, it's pretty clear that he is hungrier than ever to improve. And that's especially true after it was just revealed a few days ago that Nolan, along with fellow Birds edge rusher Jalyx Hunt, were attending Von Miller's annual Sack Summit, which, if you don't know, is an event where pass rushers from around the league get together and learn from each other. So for guys who are up and coming like Nolan and Hunt, this is a prime opportunity to improve and learn from some of the league's best, such as Max Crosby and Cam Jordan, as well as some all-time greats such as Robert Mathis, who, by the way, Nolan Smith could be seen learning from here in this video from Brian Baldinger.
Nolan Smith go through this drill that Robert Mathis right here just talked about. Just see him, just see the agility of Nolan Smith right here. Spin, drop, ice pick, no. There we go, nice.
Again, it's definitely awesome to see that Nolan Smith is still hungry and he's putting in work this offseason. And the same goes for his fellow edge rusher in Jalyx Hunt, who, of course, was also there at the Sack Summit, and he's also been working hard all offseason long. And Hunt is, of course, another guy who the Eagles are going to be relying on very heavily this season, as while Nolan Smith may be the #1 edge rusher on this team, Hunt is going to be right there with him starting for this defensive line. And very similarly to the situation with Nolan, the Eagles are going to need him to make the most of it, as Hunt's success could very well be a huge factor in determining just how good the Eagles' D-line and pass rush is this season. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with the channel recently, then you know that I think Jalyx Hunt is going to have a monster season and truly break out this year. And I believe that because, I mean, just look at what he did last season. Like, nobody expected him to even play, let alone make an impact after being drafted in the 3rd round out of Houston Christian. Yet, when his number was called, Hunt stepped up right away, and by the end of the season, the guy was sacking Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and he made a real contribution all throughout the entirety of the playoffs. So, again, given a bigger role this season and another year of experience, I expect big things from Jalyx Hunt in 2025, and again, I think he's a clear X factor for the Eagles this season. Moving on from him, though, we have a combination of a couple more edge rushers in the new additions Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche. And as opposed to Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt, I think the Eagles are definitely going to be relying on these guys a little bit less, and it's kind of up in the air as to how each of them are going to pan out for the Birds this season. But I would still call them X factors because if either one of them does work out and perform well, then I think that could take the Eagles' pass rush to the next level. I mean, for Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt, I think the Eagles kind of need them to work out, as opposed to Ojulari and Uche, which were both low-risk, high-reward offseason signings who they don't really necessarily need them to work out as much as these other guys, but obviously both of them do have very high potential. I mean, Ojulari is a guy who has been in the league for 4 years and has put up sack totals of 8, 5.5, and 6 in the past. He just hasn't really been able to stay consistently healthy. And then there's Uche, who put up 11.5 sacks in 2022 and has had an extremely high pressure rate ever since then. He just hasn't ever been able to replicate those sack numbers, and he has also been a guy that's dealt with injuries. So again, it's no sure thing, but if either one or both of these guys even can end up working out on top of Nolan and Hunt, then I think that could take this Eagles pass rush to the next level and possibly make them even better than they were last year. And that only becomes even more true if we also see a breakout year from defensive tackle Moro Ojomo, who, just like Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt, is set to step into a bigger role because of a key departure in the offseason, specifically with Milton Williams going to the Patriots. Now, if you watched my last video, then you know that I 100% see Moro Ojomo breaking out in 2025, simply because if you just look at what he was able to do last year, both numbers-wise and also just looking at the tape, it's clear that this guy has star potential. And I mean, I won't go too in-depth into it just because I already broke this down in depth in my last video, but aside from the sack numbers, the 2023 7th-round pick put up starting caliber numbers last year in most areas, including pass rush grade, pressures, and hurries, all while playing an extremely limited number of pass rushing snaps. So, given a bigger role, again, I think he's going to make the most out of it and break out. And the reason I say he's going to be an X factor for the Birds this year is pretty much for the same reason that I have guys like Nolan Smith and Jalyx Hunt on this list. That being that the Eagles lost a key player at this position, and somebody needs to step up and fill that void. And in the case of Milton Williams, I think Moro Ojomo was going to be that guy, and the Eagles just absolutely need him to step up. And moving over to a completely different position, that being cornerback, I would say the same exact thing, being that in the case of Darius Slay and his departure, the Eagles absolutely need a guy like Kelee RIngo to step up in his absence, and that's really for obvious reasons. I mean, despite there being a competition, RIngo seems to clearly be the guy who the Eagles envision is next in line to start at cornerback, so his performance is going to be crucial to the success of the Eagles secondary and pass defense this year, assuming again he is the guy that ends up starting. And the good news is, so far, RIngo has been nothing short of impressive this offseason. even being one of the biggest standouts from the team's mandatory minicamp just a few weeks ago.
I thought Kelee RIngo had an outstanding day today. He had a touchdown breakup in the corner of the end zone. I think it was McKee to Terrace Marshall in the back corner of the end zone, but the throw was good. Terrace Marshall got up for it, and Kelee met him at the high point and knocked the ball away. And then his best play of the day might have been a play where he didn't even get targeted. It was 7-on-7. He was matched up 1-on-1 with AJ. When the ball came to Jalen, you could see he was looking at AJ. He wanted to go that way. But Kelee was stride for stride with AJ down the sideline and was right with them, and the ball wasn't thrown that way. So on the final day where he gets to impress coaches, I thought Kelee had a really strong practice.
On top of the strong performances RIngo put on display throughout the spring, he also made it clear at one point during OTAs that the game is starting to become a lot slower for him, and he's starting to feel more comfortable, and he's really honing in on his technique this offseason. So given that, and given that this is now his second year playing in Vic Fangio's defense, I definitely think RIngo can have success this year as the starter. And again, the Eagles better hope that's true because they need him to pan out. And same goes for whoever the Eagles decide is going to be their starting safety next to Reed Blankenship, that being either Sidney Brown or Andrew Mukuba, as of course CJ Gardner-Johnson is gone, so whoever winds up starting needs to step up to fill his absence. And since we currently don't know who that's going to be, I figured I'd kind of cheat a little bit and include both Brown and Mukuba on this list. And look, both guys have positive things about them that make me think that they could obviously win the starting job and then also wind up panning out this year. For Sid specifically, I like his physicality, I like his energy, I like his toughness, and I think the potential is there for him to become a good player. Plus, he does have the edge in terms of NFL experience. So again, there's definitely reasons to like him. However, there are also concerns, including his struggles at times in pass coverage and the fact that he plays at 110% speed at all times, and he just really needs to learn to slow down and be a little bit more controlled and disciplined in that area. And then for Andrew Mukuba, he can pretty much do everything you would want at the safety position, whether it's tackling, hard hits, run support, communication, pass coverage, taking the football away, like he can do it all. However, he is still just a rookie, and we don't quite know how fast he's going to pick everything up. So I'd say there's question marks with both of them, but again, whoever does win that starting job, the Eagles are going to be relying on them a ton. And in that way, I think they can be counted as one of Philly's potential X factors for this coming season, unless of course they do sign Justin Simmons, but that still remains to be seen. But even after all that, I still think that there's one Eagles X factor that is more important than any of the guys that I mentioned in this video so far. Because if you'll notice, all the guys that I named so far were defensive players, and I think that's fair just because, again, they did lose a lot of talent on that side of the ball this offseason, so they're going to need these younger guys to step up. However, they also still do have a lot of talent on defense, and they still do have Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator, and as long as he's here, I feel very confident in saying that the Eagles defense is going to be towards the top of the league, especially since this is now going to be year 2 of his system as opposed to year 1 last year. But with the offense, as opposed to the defense, it's quite a different story in the sense that pretty much all of their starters are returning, 10 of 11 to be exact. So I know what to expect from pretty much all these guys. Like, I know what Jalen Hurts is capable of. I know what Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith are capable of. I know how good this offensive line is, but the one thing I don't know is how good Kevin Patullo is going to be as the offensive coordinator, given that he's just never been an OC or play caller before. So it'll be interesting to see how he manages a game, how he calls plays, and how he utilizes the talent that the Eagles have on offense. And look, so far, everything we've heard about Patullo has been overwhelmingly positive, and I do think there's a very good chance that he winds up being a good offensive coordinator, and in that case, I could actually see the Eagles offense being even better in 2025. But also, back just a couple years ago in 2023, we saw how much not having a good offensive coordinator or play caller can turn even the most talented offensive unit into a boring and predictable offense. So it is for that reason that I do believe Kevin Patullo is the Eagles' biggest X factor and make or break candidate going into this season. But that said, I'm curious to know your guys' thoughts. I mean, this list was just my opinion, so I'm curious to hear who you guys think are the Eagles' biggest X factors going into next season. So give me your lists and opinions down in the comment section below. And also, while you're at it, make sure you guys subscribe and you turn on notifications so you don't miss any more Eagles coverage just like this coming throughout the rest of this entire offseason. Obviously, training camp's coming up, and then before we know it, the season's going to be here. So Again, you're not going to want to miss any of my Eagles coverage, so subscribe and turn on notifications, and also drop a like down below to show some support, because it really does help me out a ton. Let's see if we can get to at least 500 likes on today's video. That would be greatly appreciated, guys. And also, if you want to watch another Eagles video diving into Jalyx Hunt and Moro Ojomo specifically, and why I think they're going to surprise a lot of people this season, I think you can go check this out right here. And now with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.